Hey everyone, welcome back to True Crime Buzz. I am your host, Amber, and of course Vanessa is still out of commission for a while, but she will be back. So with me again today is Miss Brittany.
Hello.
Hello. What are we drinking today?
Why do you even bother to ask? You know what I'm drinking? I'm drinking Diet Coke.
Because last time I talked to you, you actually drank beer.
Yeah, but...
I thought maybe you surprised me today.
No, you gave me the beer. Like, I'm not going to go out and actually buy beer. I'm too lazy for that, so Diet Coke it is.
You have a sweet husband that can go buy you beer.
And he would gladly do so.
You know what? That's what I'm going to get you for Christmas. I'm going to get you one of those, like, wine subscription plans where it just shows up at your door and then you have to drink it.
Don't waste your money on that. I'll be to the ceiling in wine.
Yeah.
No.
And then when I come visit, we can drink it together.
Oh, well, maybe for that.
I am drinking something different today. I have plenty of wine, but I also had some Tito's vodka, and so I was like, you know what? I'll make a drink. So I'm drinking this pretty little pink drink.
Oh, I like that cup.
I know. It's a nice little Lagunitas. It's like a mason jar, but it's got that cute little dog on the front.
So cute.
So it's Tito's vodka, I think raspberry lemonade, some kind of pink lemonade, and a little bit of Sprite.
Yeah. If you'd send that to me, then I could have drank that with you.
You know, one day we will be able to do that.
I look forward to that.
You think it'll be in our lifetime?
Maybe. I don't know. You know, technology's going pretty fast. Just think we were
Maybe.
we were the age of the dial-up internet, and look at us now.
That's true. All right. Well, anyways, so you know damn well what we're covering today because it's all I've talked about nonstop for the past week because I went down the biggest rabbit hole of rabbit holes.
You sure did.
So one of my favorite shows, The Crown, just came out this past Sunday, and it inspired me to cover the death, aka murder, of Princess Diana.
Which now you've got me watching The Crown, so thanks for that.
You're welcome. It's such a good show, and I've only seen the first 2 episodes of the newest season, so I've only just seen Diana come on the screen, and it just made me so excited, and yeah. I'm really curious now that I've done all the deep research. Obviously, I don't think it's going to be in this season. It'll probably be next season.
Right.
But how are they going to, like, what's their take going to be on this for the show? I'm real curious.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see, I feel like.
So, for those of you that don't know, on midnight, August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana died in a horrible car crash in Paris, France. But she was married to Prince Charles and is the mother of Prince William and Prince Harry, who we all know who they are today.
Yes.
Like, literally, if you don't know who they are, you live under a rock.
True facts.
So I listened to a podcast, I think it was the beginning of this year, by Colin McLaren. He is a retired homicide detective, and he literally, when all of this happened and he was watching it on TV, it infuriated him how awful the French police were treating everything. Like, they weren't treating it like a crime scene.
Right.
Like, they basically were treating it like any other regular crash, clean it up, get the road back open for the next day. And he got so furious, he literally dropped everything and went to Paris with his crew and spent 21 days there trying to investigate the death and the mystery for himself.
Wow.
And so he made a podcast about it called Fatal Voyage, Death of a Fairytale. And it's really good. So I highly suggest, after listening to our episode, if you want like all the gritty details, they do a lot of interviews with old butlers, old staff, news reporters, all that good stuff. And you get to hear those actual conversations. It's really, really, really good. Okay, so rather than just covering the crash, I thought I would give history of Diana herself, just because there's a lot of key points in her life that had a lot to do with the conspiracy theories of what we're going to cover today.
Okay.
So starting with Diana, also known as the People's Princess.
Yes.
She was originally born Diana Frances Spencer on July 1st, 1961, near Sandringham, England, to parents Viscount Edward John Spencer and Viscountess Frances Ruth Burke Roche. So Diana's father was originally an equerry, which is below a viscount, to King George VI from 1950 to 1952, and then to the Queen herself from 52 to 54.
Okay.
So Diana herself is not necessarily royalty. She's a common woman, but because her father worked closely with the family, he had that rank of nobility.
Okay.
Diana's parents divorced in 1969 when she was 8 years old, and her father had primary custody of the children. She also had 2 older sisters, Jane and Sarah, and a younger brother named Charles.
Ooh, I could never, ever marry somebody with the same name as my brother. Ugh.
Yeah, that's weird.
Gross.
Like, what if Matt's name was Patrick?
Ew.
Nope.
Ew.
I couldn't either. Like, if Sam's name was Kyle, I don't think I could do it.
I dated a guy once named Justin, and I could not get past it. I could not.
Yeah.
Nice guy. Had to go.
Just because of the name.
There's the door, friend.
Diana was initially educated at home, but later attended Riddlesworth Hall School and West Heath School. She was known as a very shy girl, but loved music and dancing. She also loved kids. So after attending finishing school in Switzerland, she moved to London in 1978 and became an assistant at Young England Kindergarten. Isn't that adorable?
It is.
So Diana and her sisters were originally titled the Honorable, so she was the Honorable Diana Spencer, but became Lady Diana Spencer after her father inherited the title of Earl in 1975.
Wow, he's just moving up on the ranks, isn't he?
Apparently he's a great guy. So Diana knew who Prince Charles was because her father worked closely with the Queen, but they didn't start dating until 1977, and he was actually 13 years older than her.
Okay.
And from what I understand, they did not spend a lot of time together. It wasn't like you know how you get a new boyfriend and you just want to spend all the time in the world with them.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's because he was royalty, that like his time was very limited, or if that's just how it was. I'm not sure. But they didn't spend a lot of time together. And since he liked this girl and his family especially liked her,
Right.
they said, look, you're in your 30s. You're heir to the throne. You need to get your life together and have a family.
You need to get started.
You need to get started. You need to marry this girl. So on February 6th, 1981, Charles proposed to Diana with an 18-karat white gold ring topped with a 12-karat oval sapphire surrounded by 14 solitaire diamonds.
It's so pretty. So pretty.
It was actually made by the crown jeweler Gerard and was reportedly inspired by a brooch that was created in 1840 for Prince Albert as a wedding present for Queen Victoria.
Okay.
The ring reportedly cost about £28,000 at the time, or about $35,000 in American money.
Woo!
Which is a lot.
That's a whole lot. That's a whole car. It's a down payment on a house.
That's a nice car. Yes.
Yeah.
And fun fact for those of you that don't know, Prince William did propose with this same ring to Kate Middleton.
Yes.
So yes, it is a beautiful ring. When interviewed after the news broke, Charles and Diana seemed very happy and very in love. Interviewers asked him how he felt, and he said he was, quote, delighted and happy, to which the reporter then asked, and in love, right? And they both responded, of course we are. So it was already kind of off to like a weird start.
Right.
Like people could kind of sense like, are they in love? Are they just having a good time? And like this is all being rushed.
Right.
But they did get married. Charles and Diana were married on July 29th, 1981 at St. Paul's Cathedral, where she officially went from Lady to Princess of Wales in front of 2,650 guests.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
That's a big wedding. But it was a big deal.
Right.
Because apparently not only was this, you know, an heir to the throne getting married, but apparently she was the first English woman to marry an heir to the throne for 300 years.
Oh, wow.
Diana wore a taffeta dress.
Taffeta.
Taffeta?
Taffeta.
What is that?
It's the fabric of the 80s, my friend.
I'm about to Google it. It's going to make me nuts. What is taffeta? Oh, I see.
Yeah, it was my flower girl dress in kindergarten for my uncle's wedding was taffeta.
It's literally, like you said, the fabric of the 80s.
Yes.
Okay, I get it now. It also had 10,000 pearls, along with a tiara, and a 25-foot veil.
Holy guacamole.
Yeah, and it took her 3.5 minutes to walk down the aisle. Because it was at St. Paul's Cathedral, and it just goes on for days.
And wasn't that televised too?
It was, yes. So this was like the wedding of the century. It was broadcast on TV all over the world. Nearly 1 billion people from 74 different countries watched it live.
I would have tripped and fallen and busted my butt in front of the world had I been her.
That
So
is
bless
way
her
too much
heart.
pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even handle a little southern wedding of my own, which is why we went to Vegas and just got married ourselves. Yeah. So I can't imagine the pressure of being like in everyone's living rooms watching you get married. No, thank you.
No. You and I have that in common. Not for me.
So as their fairy tale continued, in November of 1981, Diana announced to the world that she was pregnant with their first child. Some months later, in June of 1982, their first son, William, was born, followed by Harry in September of 1984. And people called this an heir and a spare, which means they had their son to carry on the name, and just in case something happened to their firstborn, they had a second-born son.
I hate that.
Should anything happen. Isn't that awful?
It's so awful.
And, like, that's all she's good for? Like,
Yeah.
Okay, good job. You're done now.
Yeah. No, I hate that. I hate that so much. Because they're people.
I know.
I mean, yes, they're royal, but they are people. And that's a horrible way to be referred to, the spare.
So as most people know, this marriage, by virtually all accounts, was a very unhappy one. A personal bodyguard of Diana's at the time said that she would complain about being very lonely. She felt like an outcast. She felt like she didn't belong with the family. They liked her, but because, I guess, of royal duties and that giant house, quote unquote, that they live in, like she was just by herself a lot and she got bored. She was also terrified of her father-in-law.
Philip.
Yes. And it was well known that Charles also never truly left his first love, Camilla.
Ugh. I cannot stand her.
I can't stand Camilla. And honestly, I can't stand Charles either for the same reason.
Nope.
They deserve each other. That's all I'm going to say. No, that's not all I'm going to say. So Charles was always in love with Camilla. They were on and off for a very long time, but she was married. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, the family was like, you're not going to continue seeing this married woman. You need to find someone and get married and start your own family. Enter Diana. Well, he was still in love with Camilla. And so it was very well known in the house that even while they were courting and after they got married, Camilla never left. She would show up after Diana would leave. They would spend hours on the phone together in secret. And based on all interviews with the staff, like, it was a well-known thing. You just didn't talk about it, but you knew it.
Here's my thing. Okay, looks are not everything. That is true. But you're literally like comparing a rosy, plucked fresh off a tree with no wormholes, glistening apple to a rotten apple on the ground.
You could just say Camilla.
In terms of looks, I'm just saying, like, she could be a very lovely person. I don't know. But
yeah,
Diana was clearly very lovely. Looks-wise and personality-wise, so...
And obviously so much so that she won over the queen and the whole royal family so that they asked Charles to marry her. I mean...
Right.
People just love Diana, and I didn't know her, but everything I saw about her, I love her so much.
Me too. You remember, okay, so my cousin Haley, for years, would only let her aunt, my Aunt Sally, cut her hair like Princess Diana's. For years.
Is that really why she kept her hair like that?
Yes!
I did not know that.
Yep, now you know.
I'm almost positive my mom, when her and my dad were together when I was little, I'm almost positive she cut her hair that way too.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of women did. It was like the Rachel haircut of their time. As I was saying, besides being jealous of partners, there was also jealousy of the public popularity. So when Charles and Diana would go places together, the people loved Diana so much that they would literally line up in the streets, bring her flowers, posters, and be like, Diana, Diana, just like chanting her name. No one gave a flip about Charles, and he did not like that.
Well, we still don't give a flip about Charles. I mean, I don't like wish him ill will, but like, he's the most boring member of that family.
I know. So someone who grows up as a member of the royal family and you have everything handed to you hand and foot, you're all about appearances, and then you marry a common woman and make her famous, and then the people want her instead of you, I can just see it driving him nuts.
Yes.
So Diana turned to harming herself, unfortunately, in attempts to get attention because she didn't feel loved by Charles. She would complain about that a lot too to her staff. She would cut herself, which wasn't well understood at the time. They didn't understand like why you were doing it and what that meant.
Right.
She also became bulimic, and she fell, quote unquote, down the stairs while she was early pregnant with William. and was later accused of throwing herself down the stairs on purpose, which one of her staff confirmed because no one was listening to her and no one would give her attention. So she thought that was the only way that people would care about her, is if she hurt herself.
That is fucking awful.
Isn't that awful?
That's so horrible. I cannot imagine.
And after time of realizing that Charles didn't truly love her and probably never would, she started having several affairs of her own. Several different men, which I won't go over because they're nobody important now. And in 1992, a scandal broke out because heaven forbid Diana have an affair. Now, Charles, you know, he can do whatever he wants, but a conversation between her and one of her lovers, James Gilby, was somehow taped, and no one ever claimed who did it or how they did it. But they taped a phone call between the two lovers, and it was called Squidgygate. Which I had never heard of until I was doing research. Yes, because he called her a nickname called Squidge or Squidgy like 53 times during the one phone call.
What on earth? That's a horrible nickname.
Squidge.
It makes me think of Squidward off of SpongeBob.
It does.
It must be a British thing and we just don't understand it.
So, of course, after years and years of just an unhappy marriage and a lot of back and forth, they did announce their separation in December of 1992. It was actually announced by the British Prime Minister John Major, reading an official statement from the royal family to the House of Commons. So they weren't divorced, they were just separating.
Okay.
Then, in 1995, Diana released her autobiography, Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words. And this is where she openly talked about her struggles with bulimia, depression, and her suicide attempts, and just basically her personal life living as the princess.
Right.
And how miserable she was married to Charles.
Were they weren't divorced then when she released that?
They were just separated.
I can't even believe that the royals let that book out.
Exactly. That's the big thing. So they weren't divorced yet. They were just separated because divorce, while it's allowed, thanks King Henry, it's very frowned upon. And basically, if you divorce, they really don't want you remarrying. You're supposed to marry once, and if it doesn't work out, then they hate it, but that's it.
Yeah.
So they were hoping that maybe a separation would help and that they would eventually get back together. But once she basically put that book out, she also went on to the BBC and did an interview about it, where she talked about these feelings that she had about her failed marriage and discussed the infidelity. And she was famously quoted as saying, quote, "There are 3 of us in this marriage." Talking about Camilla.
I wish that our fans could see my mouth drop to the floor.
It was scandalous.
Get it, girl, though. Yes.
Like, it's scandalous enough if, like, a regular celebrity did this, but this is the royal family. You're not supposed to have any laundry, clean or dirty, out there at all. And Diana was coming out and saying, this is the shit I'm dealing with.
Good for her, though. Good for her.
No one's going to listen to me. I bet you'll listen to me now. You know? That beautiful little rebel.
Yes.
So, of course, Queen Elizabeth took this as the final straw and basically urged them to get a divorce.
I bet she did.
She said, quote, "Dearest Diana, having had consultations with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prince of Wales, I think it's in the country's best interest if you divorce." End quote.
Damn. It's in the country's best interest.
Yes.
I mean, I know they're royals, but man, that's a hard blow right there.
I know. Like, she wasn't even giving her a choice. So even if Diana did that and maybe felt bad about it and wanted to somehow reconcile her marriage, the Queen was like, nope, that's it. You're done. So on August 26, 1996, their divorce was finalized and Diana received a settlement of 17 million pounds. I didn't do the American math, but it's still 17 million sounds like a lot.
It's millions, for sure.
Yeah. She also got to retain her title as Princess of Wales since she was still mother of 2 noble princes who could eventually take the throne. She also got to keep her apartments at Kensington Palace, but she did agree to give up her title, Her Royal Highness, and any claim to the British throne. So that sounds like a win-win to me. You can call me whatever you want.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
And you don't have to deal with Charles anymore. Congratulations.
That's the real prize there.
Following the split, she becoming very, very paranoid. And I say paranoid loosely because there's a lot of speculation whether she was being paranoid or if she was getting inside information warning her about what was going to happen. So, based on interviews with her personal butler, she stayed in constant fear for her life following the split. She would express paranoia of being followed, that her phone lines were being tapped, and she would actually ask them to help her pull up floorboards and look for listening devices, and would ask them to look under her car to check to see if there was any cut in the brake lines, anything missing, because she just had this horrible feeling that someone was trying to harm her or get rid of her.
That is rough. That's a rough way to live. But I guess after that book, makes sense,
right?
That she would be so scared, you know?
Yeah. She would also become very close with psychics and mediums. She was looking for literally anyone to help her or give her advice. And I'm talking not just like, you know, oh, I'm bored, let me call a psychic. Like, she became friends with them. She would call them daily to be like, hey, just letting you know this is what I'm doing. Call me back when you get a chance. And then in a note she wrote her butler, it read, quote, "This is the most difficult part of my life. I fear that Charles is going to organize an accident in my car. I'm going to die of head injuries and be killed in order so that he may marry Camilla," end quote. So she was like straight up predicting her future pretty much.
Wow. That's insane.
Specifically in a car, in an accident, and she's going to die of head injuries.
That's
like,
bananas.
I know. Ugh, just gave me like heebie-jeebies.
Yes.
She even took it a step further, and in October of 1996, during her divorce proceedings, she documented all this with her divorce lawyer and wrote down, quote, "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for him to marry Camilla," end quote.
Oof.
So she even had it in writing. Like, it wasn't just her just saying this. Like, she wanted everyone to know, this is what I feel. So if anything happens to me, he did it. And so this document was apparently taken to Scotland Yard and kept under lock and key. And I think that's where it remains to this day. I couldn't find anything more about it. So now that she's divorced, she did start dating. And in 1997, a family friend and Egyptian businessman named Mohammed Al-Fayed offered his yacht to Diana and her sons to get away on holiday to try to cheer her up from all the crap she was going through. She gladly accepted, and this is where she met his son and her future lover, Dodi Fayed.
Okay.
So now that she has this new boy toy, there was a lot of pictures of her on this yacht with him, just like fun in the sun, kissing, like she had a new boyfriend, and she looked really, really happy. So shortly after that, they decided to go to Paris the day before the accident on August 30th, 1997. They checked into the hotel, the Ritz Paris, which his father owned. He owned the Ritz, and he owned some other, I think a store chain that's no longer around. He was a very wealthy man.
Okay.
So they went to the hotel, they had dinner, they were just kind of hanging out in Paris for the night. But what's weird is normally when any royalty or celebrity goes anywhere, they let the local authorities know for safety reasons. They know that they're in town. Usually if there's an agenda, they let them know that. But for some reason, they didn't do that. They just kind of showed up in Paris and was just having a good time. They didn't really have an agenda. They didn't tell anybody. They just showed up with their own bodyguards and their own staff.
So wait, did the boys go with her on the trip? Because you said the father had said, you can borrow this yacht to get away with your sons. Mm-hmm. So did they go with her on the trip to Paris, or had they?
No.
Okay.
So I think the trip on the yacht was sometime in the summer. They went on that trip, came back, and then she went by herself with Dottie on like a little romantic getaway in Paris for the evening.
Okay.
So around midnight on August 31st, 1997, Diana and Dottie wanted to leave the Ritz Hotel and go to his new apartment instead. Like I said, this was very a loosey-goosey trip. They didn't really have a plan. They were just kind of like, what do you want to do now? Let's go to your new apartment. But there were tons of paparazzi outside the hotel, and they were waiting to get pictures of them. So Dottie and his staff decided it would be a good idea to have a decoy car that looked like theirs in front, to look like they got in that car, but actually sneak out the back.
Okay.
Diana's bodyguard that was with her initially thought that that was a bad idea, but he was kind of outnumbered, and they were like, no, it's fine. Like, this is what we're going to do. And so they decided to do that anyway. So Diana, her bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, Dottie, and their driver, Henry Paul, all got into a black Mercedes S280 and raced towards the Pont des Alma tunnel in Paris, France, on their way to his new apartment. Apparently, this trick didn't work very well, and paparazzi were tailing closely behind, trying to get any pictures they could of the couple. And I'm talking very close. I'm talking they were on motorbikes, like right on their tail and all around them trying to get pictures.
Good gravy. Of people in cars? Like, what is so exciting about that?
Because it's Princess Diana and they want to know who her new boy toy is and they want to know what she's doing. She was like the biggest celebrity in the world at this time, pretty much.
Right.
So while paparazzi is following them, they make it to that tunnel, and the tunnel goes under an overpass, and it has traffic going both directions. So there's 2 lanes on each side, and it's not divided by a median, but a series of pillars. So from here on out, it's a lot of he said, she said, speculation. There's no video and no pictures of the crash whatsoever.
What? No, that doesn't even make sense. Like, there's paparazzi in there and they didn't take... Ugh, okay.
Yeah, we'll get into all that. It doesn't make sense, but as of today, there is no released pictures or video footage of the accident. So all we know is what little forensics can tell us.
Okay.
So the driver somehow lost control coming into the tunnel and hit that 13th pillar. Mm-hmm. And supposedly it spun the car around facing in the opposite direction.
Okay.
So as of right now, no other cars, just them hitting a pillar. It was estimated that the driver was going between 85 to 100 miles per hour.
Good God.
And the speed limit in that tunnel specifically is about 30 miles per hour, which sounds about right to me. So the fact that even not knowing what the speed limit was, just knowing he was going that fast in a close tunnel. So see how narrow this is, 2 lanes.
What?
I mean, you're not going to go 85 to 100 miles per hour through there. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you do, you're not going to survive it. No.
Right. So once the crash happened, Dottie Fayed and the driver Henry were pronounced dead at the scene. The bodyguard Trevor was the only survivor with severe injuries, thanks to being the only person in the car wearing his seatbelt and the airbag deploying. And these severe injuries included half of his face and his entire tongue missing. So it was basically all facial injuries. And then apparently the rest of his body was fine because he was in a seatbelt.
His whole tongue?
His whole tongue and half of his face were just like gone.
Do you know if they were able to reattach?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I look at this picture of this car, I don't know how anyone survived. Henry was driving, the bodyguard was in the front seat, and then Diana and her boyfriend were in the back seat.
Okay.
And that's the Mercedes, how they found it.
Holy cow.
So basically the whole front end is crushed in, and crushed being in all caps. So how a guy in the front seat survived that with just some facial injuries, and they were severe, but I mean,
I don't know.
It's shocking to me.
I mean, if anything, it would look like the people in the back would survive versus the people in the front. But,
yes.
I mean, if you're not wearing a seatbelt, that doesn't much matter. You're going to go elsewhere in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's rough.
And also, when I immediately read that Trevor, the bodyguard, survived, I thought, well, then why do we not have this mystery solved if someone survived this crash? Apparently, he remembers everything leading up to the accident as clear as a bell, but remembers literally nothing after he got into the car. Nothing.
That's awful. And don't you know he has to feel awful about that as well? Like, I'm sure he wishes he could remember. I hate that for him.
I know. So initial reports for Diana said that she was actually still alive after the accident, but had a bad hip and leg injury, and that she immediately had a heart attack right after the crash. So they rushed her to the La Petite Salpêtrière hospital, where she underwent 2 hours of emergency surgery before being declared dead sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. And she was only 36.
Ooh.
I know. Like, she was so young. When I tried to look up anything about a death certificate, because even before going to conspiracy theories, it was like I was trying to solve this damn case myself.
Absolutely.
And I should have known I wasn't going to solve it, because if professionals after 20-something years couldn't solve it, like, why am I going to do any better? But I tried to find her death certificate, couldn't find it. But apparently the doctor who signed her death certificate labeled it as a suspicious death, and that technically the reason for her death was actually a chest injury. Something about a vein in her lungs had like this tiny little tear in it from the accident. And even though it was tiny, it was a big deal. And they could not get her heart to beat regularly, hence her having that heart attack. They just couldn't get it back to normal. And her body just gave up and she died.
Wow.
Before I go any further, like, doing research on this, while it made me crazy because there's so many theories and a lack of evidence and all this stuff, like, it, like, wrecked me because it's just so fucking sad.
It is. It's really
because
sad.
She was so beautiful and she did so many things for people. She was called the People's Princess for a reason. Like, she was like a young Mother Teresa. She went to all these places with kids that were sick with cancer. She did a lot with animals, just a big humanitarian. Anyone that asked for her help or even didn't ask for help, she was looking, how can I volunteer my time? How can I help the world be a better place?
A lot with the AIDS.
A lot with, yes, HIV and AIDS and spreading awareness, like, and she was beautiful, and it was just like, she was so young. And a mom
kids.
of these two precious boys that have no idea what the royal life is going to be for them. Oh, it just breaks my heart anytime. Do you remember when she died?
Yes. Yes, I do.
I do too. Like, it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being so sad when it happened. We were 9.
Yeah.
I was feeling like I was 20 years old.
Yeah. You know, it started us on a life of true crime.
It sure did, because we knew something's up here.
Something's fishy there.
So while the police immediately detained all the paparazzi around, they took their cameras, they detained them, because from what I understand from eyewitness accounts, and these are several, it's not just one person, they were being chased by paparazzi. But not only that, as soon as the crash happened, the paparazzi hopped off their bikes and out of their cars and swarmed the car and took pictures in a frenzy. They said it was just flashing lights, just constant clicking.
What on earth?
Paparazzi sticking their cameras inside the wrecked vehicle, taking pictures.
Oh, that's so disrespectful.
How messed up is that?
It's very messed up. I feel like you've got to be a really messed up person anyways to be a paparazzi, but that takes it to a whole nother level.
Right? I couldn't get over that. Just those sick individuals. I don't even care if it's Jane Smith down the road and not Princess Diana. Like, why would you do that?
Because people are creepy. You know, remember in Hinterkaifeck Effect when the people stood and watched autopsies in the front yard?
Yeah. So the only kudos that police get from that is when they showed up, the first thing they did was take their cameras and detain the paparazzi. And some of them even got charges pressed, so good for them.
Yes.
But the rest of it sucks. I'll just say that. Basically immediately called a flatbed tow truck to come get the car. Put the car on the back of the truck. It took off. They had a team come in and sweep up all the glass and all the debris. And then a water truck came in and hosed the tunnel down. And it was reopened for traffic for the morning.
First off, that's horrible police work. Secondly, which is not surprising because otherwise we wouldn't even have a podcast. But this was a royal person.
Correct.
How on earth did they get away with that? Well, I bet your conspiracies are going to tell me.
So this is the part where Colin McLaren, the detective that does the podcast, this is where he was like, I'm done. I've seen enough. He literally dropped everything and went to Paris like the next day. I'm going to look into this myself.
I wish I could do that.
I know, right? Like, that would be the job.
It would be.
We missed our calling.
We did. Private investigators.
Also, you mentioned traffic cameras. There happened to be 12 of them along the whole route that they took up into the tunnel, and they just did not happen to be working that night. None of them.
None of them. Okay.
None of them. There's literally no video. The only video they have of that night is Diana and the driver and Dottie leaving the hotel to go to somewhere. And that's only because there's a CCTV camera pointed at the revolving door. But literally nothing of the traffic.
I'm going to call bullshit on this on every level because, well, first off, the traffic cameras, that's awful. But there were cameras seized. There's footage of this. Now, were those cameras destroyed? Did they not want to release the stuff off of the cameras? But there was evidence. There were pictures. There were videos.
There has to be something somewhere.
Oh, there is. 100%.
And try as I may, I Googled for hours trying to find pictures of this. And the only pictures I could find were of the car, pretty much, being wrecked that I showed you. Like they said, the paparazzi were leaning in the car and taking pictures. Like, I don't want to see that, but I wanted to see if they were out there with any sort of information linked to them about, you can see this here, you can tell, nothing.
Oh, yeah, because if there is like a murder picture, you can find it online these days.
Right.
If you want to see it, it's there. So, that's kind of bizarre.
And after only a few months, just a few months, the French police produced a 6,000-page document of their investigation, but refused to release the details to the public. Initially, they blamed and pressed charges against the several photographers for the accident, but then later stated that they concluded that the official cause of the accident was that the driver was intoxicated at the time with alcohol, and that he lost control, and that was the cause for the accident.
Okay.
And 6 years later, the British police decided to give their try, and they basically came to the same conclusion. They were like, yep, he was drunk and lost control, and that's what happened.
6 years later, your future king's mother died in a car accident, and you wait 6 years to investigate it. Boy, don't you know Harry and William have to be like, thanks, man.
Yeah, I know.
Guys were right on it.
So, now that we know the only details really, I mean, I've got more details, but that's the basis of what everyone knew at the time. That's it. No footage, no pictures, no real true cause of what happened. So let's get into all the theories. So most theories say, in a nutshell, that the royal family had everything to do with it.
I might agree with that.
They think, and there's several reasons we'll go over, they basically think they just wanted her gone. She was obviously a rebel and would not keep quiet. For whatever reason, we'll get into that too. They just wanted her gone, and so the royal family was behind it. Mm-hmm. There are other theories that I saw one theory where they think she faked her own death, and her and Elvis and Tupac and everyone else are just hanging out somewhere enjoying life on a secret island.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I couldn't do that as a mom. There's no way.
No, and that was where I immediately debunked it, because she would never. Not as a mom.
Nope.
There was also a theory that it actually had nothing to do with Diana and everything to do with Dottie's father, Muhammad Al-Fayed.
Oh, yeah, because he was, like, powerful and rich. So I guess maybe.
He was a very rich businessman, so naturally he had enemies. So it could have been taking out his son as a FU to him, and Diana just happened to be involved. There's a lot of that. But there's also other pieces of evidence and other things that have came out since that are very important that the podcast I listened to goes over. And so those are the ones I want to go over.
Okay.
So let me go back to the driver first, because that's the biggest thing. So they ruled the accident as fault of the driver, who unfortunately died, saying that he was too drunk to drive.
Right. And was speeding like a crazy person.
Yeah. So the driver, Henry Paul, actually worked for the Fayed family, not Diana, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that either. Even though she wasn't technically a royal, I mean, she was still a princess. So I would have figured she would have had to have had an approved royal driver. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Like her own assigned person. He also wasn't a usual driver. That was not his job. He was some other form of security personnel. But for some reason that night, he was the driver. He was also supposed to have that night off. He worked that day, but he was called back in due to the couple staying out late. So he left his regular shift at 7 p.m., went to a couple bars where we assume he had a couple drinks, then went home, which who knows how many drinks he had there, and then came back to do the night shift to drive them wherever they wanted to go.
So responsible. Don't drink and drive, kids.
Right. He was also known to love alcohol, and some called him an alcoholic. So why they decided he should be the driver, especially after letting him go home and then come back.
Yeah, no,
there's so many things that don't add up in this, and this is the first one. He reportedly had several drinks that evening, including when he came back and was waiting on them, he was hanging out at this Hemingway bar while he was waiting for them. And when asked what he was drinking, he had like, you know, a glass in his hand.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a yellowish color. And when they asked him, what are you drinking? He just replied, pineapple juice. But he never drank pineapple juice. And they highly speculated that it was actually a liquor called French pastis, which I'd never heard of, but it's apparently similar to scotch or whiskey and has approximately 45% alcohol content.
Holy cow.
So he had 2 or 3 of these quote unquote drinks.
That's a lot of drinks, yeah.
And that's just that alone. That's just him at the Hemingway. That doesn't include the other bars he went to and when he went home.
Where was the regular driver?
I don't know. That's a great question too. The whole night, nothing adds up. Nothing. Like the fact that none of them were wearing seatbelts except the bodyguard. From all reports, Diana always wore her seatbelt everywhere she went. And for some reason, the one night she dies, she's not wearing her seatbelt.
I don't know.
So, of course, after everything happened, they did toxicology reports, and it did show that his blood alcohol content level was 3.5 times the legal limit for France.
Holy cow.
Now, they do say that the effect of that much alcohol in your system can have a different effect on someone who normally drinks all the time. You know how, like, the more you drink, the higher your tolerance?
Right. There's such thing as functioning alcoholism. You can
Right.
get up and you can go to work and you can do tasks and be loaded. Whereas if you or I were to get that loaded, we wouldn't be able to do any tasks.
I wouldn't even make it to the car. I couldn't drive anybody. I would be in the floor sleeping probably.
Right.
Or puking. One of the two.
Or
but
both.
I wouldn't be coherent. So there's also a thing that happened that's really weird. So when this crash happened, they did at least take blood samples from everyone who was involved. But when they did, they didn't immediately label them. They put them in the fridge overnight and let the next person who was working label them, which makes no sense. So Dottie's dad, Mohammed, he thought what they did was that they swapped blood samples on purpose between the driver and Dottie to make it seem that the driver was actually drinking a lot.
But in fact, he hadn't been.
But in fact, he hadn't been and actually crashed on purpose, like a murder for hire. So he demanded that the blood be retested. And when they retested it, it turns out everything was correct. But they also found that not only did he have alcohol in his system, he also had a lot of prescription medications in his system on top of it.
Oh my. And alcohol and prescriptions can not always work well together. Were they they were legal prescription drugs?
From what I understand, they were prescriptions for him.
Okay.
Plus, he was like flying through that tunnel. So there was also the possibility of another driver. Like there's actual hardcore evidence that there was another driver. And so the question is, was this driver a murder for hire and caused the accident on purpose? So let's get into that.
Okay.
So they noticed that there was white paint marks on the Mercedes car because it was a black car, so you can see white really easy. And a broken taillight. Like not their taillight, but a taillight just by itself on the road.
Okay.
Meaning somehow a white car was involved. And when they tested that paint, they found out that it was specifically belonging to a unique car, 1983 to 1987 models of the Fiat Uno car. And this was actually the most popular car in Europe at the time. So it wasn't like it narrowed it down a whole lot. There was actually, just in France alone, there was 4,600 vehicles that people owned of this specific car in white.
Wow.
Somehow they got through all of those, and it led to 2 interviews of owners. The first one belonged to James Anderson, who was a French photographer and was speculated to be there that night trying to take pictures. But when he was interviewed, he denied being in Paris at all that night and said that he was 177 miles away with his wife. He was later found in the summer of 2000, so a few years later, locked inside his BMW, covered in gasoline, and burned to death with a giant hole in his head with 2 bullets. Like, what the fuck?
Holy shit.
See, now that right there sounds like someone trying to get rid of somebody. Like, there's no question to me. That just screams, you know too much or you did something wrong, you're done.
Yeah.
But they officially ruled it as suicide.
No. How can you shoot yourself in the head and then set yourself on fire? Or other way around. How are you going to set yourself on fire and then shoot yourself in the head? That's the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life.
So when they brought that up about, okay, so why does he have a giant hole in his head, you know, and then also on fire? Like, that doesn't make any sense. They said that he lit himself on fire, but because he was inside a car from the heat expansion, it blew out his head. So where did the bullets come from? Like,
oh my God.
I'm telling you, that could be its own separate thing, but I just had to bring that up because it was so weird.
We need to do a bonus episode on this.
We
real.
need to look into that a lot more.
Yes, we do.
So they somehow eventually ruled him out, but the fact that he was found, you know, with all that extra stuff a few years later, it's very suspicious.
Super suspicious.
So the other guy they interviewed, his name was Lee Van Tan. He was of Vietnamese descent, I believe, who lived in France. He also denied being there that night when he was interviewed. He said, no, I was at work. However, what's real weird, I wouldn't say weird, I would say coincidental, and there are no coincidences in true crime.
None.
Per Miss Nancy Grace herself. So apparently, literally hours after the accident, he came home and painted his car from white to red. The same day as the crash.
Did they, like, put on the news that they were looking for white cars? Or, like,
No, this was not initially found.
Okay.
Because the initial treatment of this whole thing was bullshit, and they didn't take any evidence hardly at all.
Yep, no.
I don't know who found it, but little by little, these things kept coming up. Like, oh, there's white paint. What about that? And then they looked into it. Also, he refuses to speak to the media even to this day. And when police asked him about repainting his car, he said, I didn't paint it that same day. I painted it months later. But sometime in the early 2000s, his dad straight up came out and said he came home in a weird, frantic mood and painted his car red.
Suspicious.
Daddy sold him out. He also had to replace his rear bumper and taillight. And for some reason, after all that, they eventually ruled him out also. But why?
Why to any of this being ruled out?
So even to this day, the identity of the owner of the white Fiat Uno has never been found, despite Mohammed, Dottie's father, offering £1 million in 1999, asking for any information to the owner of the white Fiat, which would be about $2.5 million in today's money.
That person would be a dead person if they offered money. I mean, honestly, I wish somebody would come forward. I wish somebody was that brave, but I think we can all agree this wasn't just like a simple car crash. I don't know exactly what happened, but it's fishy.
And also, like Muhammad, yes, his son died and that's tragic, but he straight up will not give up trying to figure out what happened to his son and also Princess Diana. Like, he swears up and down that it was the royal family. He said in interviews, I'm almost positive it's the royal family and specifically Philip.
How absolutely fucked would that be? That you would kill your kid's mom?
I know.
Because she exposed that you were sleeping with a horse face? Like, we already all knew that. I mean, I'm just saying.
Her name is Camilla, Brittany.
Look, I don't live there, so I don't have to worry about it.
So this part, I'm not 1,000% sure, but I did want to mention it because it is talked about in the podcast I listened to. When Colin McLaren and his team went to France, they noticed very dark, thick tire skid marks located prior to the tunnel. That he said when he went, they were very thick, and like even after time, you could still see them. Obviously, I showed you on Google Maps. I didn't see them, but
right.
They could have, they repaint it, they repave it, whatever. But they were about 7 meters long, and the tire tread was confirmed to match the same tire that was on the Mercedes at that time. And what's weird is the tracks contain like a bulge in one part of it, about 2/3 of the way down, and a sudden change of direction, which means they slammed on their brake at first to make the tracks, and then something had to hit them for them to change direction abruptly. Does that make sense?
Yes. No. Makes perfect sense.
So what he thinks is that the white Fiat was coming into this merge lane into the main road before it goes to the tunnel and cut them off and hit them, which caused them, when they saw it, to initially slam on their brakes, but then when they made contact, hit that bulge part of the tracks and move over and actually hit the retaining wall.
Okay, so he thinks that they actually crashed before they went into the tunnel.
Before, yes.
How long is this tunnel? Do you know?
It's long. I mean, it's not long, but it's long to me when I was on Google Maps. But he thinks that once they hit this retaining wall because they also found thick rubber marks on this retaining wall and up here on the capping. So they think the car actually went airborne.
Somebody needs to reopen this.
But they ruled out the only 2 people they even thought may be involved somehow. Even though that Lee Van Tan guy, I feel like it was him. Who comes home after midnight and decides to paint their car a different color and fix a taillight and then says that they had nothing to do with it? Like,
I don't know. I've made my own new conspiracy theory just listening to this. I've taken bits and pieces from each of your stories and been like, this is what happened.
So other weird things, the medical staff, a lot of people think that maybe it was a murder for hire and a hit, but obviously Diana didn't die immediately. So they think that the medical staff were actually the ones that either let her die or killed her. So there's a theory that the medical staff, once they got there, injected her with something, took her to the hospital, and basically let her die. And what's weird about that is that it took the ambulance 1 hour and 43 minutes to get Diana to the hospital, which was only 4 miles away from the tunnel.
Shut up.
Mm-hmm. When they were questioned about that, they said it was because she had that heart attack and they were trying to revive her in the ambulance, and that's why they didn't actually go inside for that long, because they were trying to save her life in the ambulance. It just sounds like bullshit to me.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Mm-hmm. Bullshit. Holy cow.
Our bullshit meter is going like boop, 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 boop.
Off the charts.
And then finally, there is this lovely couple, this American husband and wife, Jack and Robin Firestone. They were literally at the site when everything happened, and that they have seen things that they swear on each other's lives they saw, and no one seems to take them seriously.
Because they're Americans?
I don't know. I just think they saw things and I believe them. They literally have been interviewed by everyone. Like anyone that would listen to them, any news TV show, any talk show, they were on there telling their story. And they even wrote a book. So they were there that night. They heard the crash, but they were at the end of the tunnel. So it wasn't like in front of them. It was behind them. And they said as soon as the crash happened, when they tried to look through the tunnel, they saw a bright flash of light, which other people have speculated to see. To me, that sounds like paparazzi maybe flashing the cameras while they're driving.
Yeah.
But no one seems to understand the flash. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. There was no flash. But they said there was a bright flash. They also immediately approached the French police as soon as they arrived on the scene to say, hey, we were witnesses. Let's give you our statement. We want to help. And the police told them, no, it's okay. We have all the witnesses we need. Thank you, though. And basically ran off. Mm-hmm. What's weird is sometime either a few hours later or the next day, they talked to a different police officer because they're like, this doesn't feel right to us. We saw something, very important. We want to talk to someone and give our side. We want to help any way we can.
Right.
And that police officer, when they described the guy that they initially talked to, they were like, we don't know who that is. So was it even a real police officer?
Did Paris owe the Windsor family some favors? That's a question I feel like we need to be bringing up now.
That's a huge question.
Because this has to be the shittiest police work ever. And
It's
we have covered some stories where, nothing was done. Mm-hmm. But this takes the cake, my friend.
So they decided to take it a step further and they contacted Daddy Muhammad. Because they knew he would take them. They knew he would take them seriously, and he did. So he somehow got them back in touch with the French police to try to write down their statements. Mm-hmm. They took their statements and said, you know what? We have so many statements. We're going to combine both of your statements into one joint statement. And they were both like, okay, that's weird, but, at least you're taking our statement. Then they produced this document that was like teeny tiny font, all in French, and asked them to sign it. And the guy was like, no, I don't speak French.
Yeah.
And the guy said, no, we have a interpreter and he can interpret it for you. And he's like, no, this is your interpreter. They could say whatever they want. I'm not signing anything.
Yeah.
He said, can I take this document to my lawyer and then sign it? And they said, no, this document can't leave the police station.
Wow.
So they still didn't feel right about it, obviously, but somehow they were able to present on a witness stand to the high court. And they said that they were treated awful. They said that while they were on the witness stand, they would ask them questions that they didn't really have answers to. And then when they would say, okay, well, you can get down from the stand, they'd say, well, I do want to make a statement. Can I do that? And they'd say, well, if you really want to. They wouldn't give them the time of day. They just wanted them to answer the questions they had and nothing else. So they felt like they still weren't taken seriously. They went to every TV show and news outlet they could find to try to tell their side of the story. And they even wrote a book, like I said, called Chasing Diana in 2012. But they were smart enough to title it a dramatic screenplay based on true events.
Yeah, no, that's smart.
Right? So I still want to read it because even if they did add something here and there, it still spawned from their eyewitness accounts. And I'm dying to know what it says.
Are there interviews with these people?
Thousands. They're in the podcast I listened to. They were on pretty much any talk show. If you Google them, thousands of articles come up.
Glad somebody is brave enough to do that.
As far as why the royal family would want to murder Diana, if they were really behind this, there's a few theories on that. They're mainly down to they just didn't like her because the marriage didn't work out. They didn't like how rebellious she was and outspoken she was about her life. The royal family doesn't do that.
No.
There was also a lot of speculation as to either she was pregnant or going to marry Dadi Fayed. And he was Muslim. Oh. So yeah, she's not Her Royal Highness anymore, but she's still the mother of the future heirs. Right. And so they cannot have a Muslim in the royal family. That's just no. Can't do it.
Not back then. Could you imagine?
Because Diana made these little comments to paparazzi shortly before all this happened, saying that she had a big surprise to tell them. And so everyone speculated she was pregnant. But we will never know because as soon as she was pronounced dead, they embalmed her body.
What? They didn't do an autopsy?
Nope. She died, they did a death certificate, and they immediately embalmed her. So we'll never know.
I'm dead. I'm deceased. I'm done.
She's deceased. She's literally laying on her bed.
I am deceased. Holy cow.
Which is also weird in itself, but even more weird because it's illegal in France for them to embalm someone without the family or official consent. Like, what? There's just so many. Do you see why my hair is like falling out after this past week of doing research and why I've been just so like, bleh.
You're going to be gray.
All right. So those are the main theories. I tried to go down the other rabbit hole called Reddit. Let me just dip my toe in the Reddit pond.
You can dip your toe.
I couldn't. I got suckered into it. Is it out there for you to read? And should you read it? Yes. But do it when you have like a full weekend, maybe even on this upcoming holiday. If you're off work, go for it. But if you're trying to do it like an hour before bed, don't do it. Don't do it. You'll be up all night and then you'll dream about it and then you'll think you solved it when you woke up.
Amber solved this shit.
I didn't though, and that's another reason why I feel so crazy, because every time I do a podcast, I try to solve it for myself, and some of them I'm like, this is it. This one, I don't know.
That's pitiful.
Literally either side makes sense to me. Does it sound like a horrible tragic accident? Yes.
No. Is it tragic? Yes. Was it an accident? Absolutely not. I mean, you have convinced me there was no way that this was an accident.
The fact that there's a lack of evidence is what makes me so skeptical. And the way that they handled everything is so weird.
I just want a petition. I want to start like a petition for them to release the camera and video cameras from the paparazzi, the footage from that. I want that.
I know. Those are the majority of the conspiracies. You can look them up yourself. There's tons of Reddit feeds, YouTube videos. There's other podcasts that do episodes on this. Like, there's a plethora of people's opinions. There's not a plethora of evidence.
Okay.
So do with that what you may. So on the morning of September 6, 1997, Diana's funeral procession commenced from Kensington Palace, her coffin resting on a gun carriage drawn by 6 black horses. Thousands of mourners packed the streets to watch, and 15-year-old William and 12-year-old Harry joined the final stretch of the 4-mile procession for their mother. That just, breaks my heart.
Oh, mine too.
An estimated 2.5 billion with a B people tuned in on television to watch the ceremony at Westminster Abbey, which featured a eulogy from Diana's brother and a performance from Elton John, which I know you and I both remember.
Oh yeah, Candle in the Wind. I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to ruin your ears like that. But,
but we all remember.
Yes.
Diana's body was eventually laid to rest at a gravesite on a small island at her family's estate. So at least she ended at her family's estate and not somewhere for people to gawk at.
Yes, I agree with that.
What sucks and what I don't like is that Queen Elizabeth didn't immediately respond publicly to Diana's death and was highly criticized for it. But she did eventually make a televised address from Buckingham Palace on September 5th, the day before the funeral. She waited 5 days. And she said, quote, "No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her but felt they knew her will remember her. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. I share in your determination to cherish her memory." Which was a weird thing to say.
That's the weirdest statement.
There are lessons to be drawn from her life?
That should have been like, she led a great example through her charity work. She was a wonderful mom to her kids, and a valued member of this family. Even if she wasn't to them, they could have lied. And I love the Queen, so I hate to say that.
I know, right? Like that. I think that's where I struggle the most, is because I love the Queen. I love the Queen.
I do too.
But, I didn't like that at all.
Wasn't a good statement.
Nope. And in 2007, just before the 10th anniversary of her death, William and Harry honored their mother with a special concert that took place at what would have been her 46th birthday, and all proceeds of the event, of course, went to charity. William and Kate also remembered Diana when they named their second child Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana, who was born on May 2nd, 2015.
Who shares 2 names with my daughter.
Yes. And then there is also the Diana Princess of Wales Memorial Fund that was founded in her name after her death, which provides resources to this day for palliative care, mental health, emergency responders, and animal conservation. But, that was a rough one. That's the story of the death, aka murder, of Princess Diana.
Somebody from that family had something to do with it.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast, now available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. We have new episodes every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcast, and once we get 100 reviews, we're going to do a giveaway, and you don't want to miss it.
Also, be sure to follow us on social media. Go like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at TCBud Podcast. And also be sure to check out our website at www.truecrimebuzz.com. Until next time,
Cheers!